So there are many resources for single-family home improvements and energy efficiency. For example, as of the date of the recording of this session, in the state of Michigan here, our Michigan Whole Home Energy Rebate Program is underway and is approved for single-family housing, but has not yet been approved to assist with multifamily. The weatherization programs that are available across the United States, while adopted for multifamily in many regions, tend to be more streamlined and thought out as far as their process goes in serving the single family home sector. In addition, who is paying the energy bills? The tenant or the landlord? Both. These can all be issues that come up in multifamily living situations. And so all of these, along with many other barriers, making multifamily income qualified housing developments a challenge to evaluate and improve the benefits for residents who need it most. So please join us here today on a research project discussing this topic done in Detroit, Michigan. Now, before we get started, a huge thanks to our platinum sponsor, Rheem, with their ProTerra water heater. They can easily swap out gas water heaters with their 120 volt water heater, heat pump water heater to decarbonize our buildings, single family and multifamily housing. They also have the 240 volt one with the backup resistance water heater. I have the version 3 of that for several years. It works great. This uses heat out of the air to heat up to 400% efficiency, and then uses a refrigerant to help, again, heat that water line with that air and decarbonize for much less energy usage compared to gas or electric heating. So you can check them out over at greenhomeinstitute.org/REAM HPWH for decarbonized water heaters. All right, again, welcome to Energy Efficient Upgrades in Urban Low Income Multifamily Housing. This session is brought to you by the Green Home Institute. The Green Home Institute is a nonprofit with a mission to empower people to make healthier and more sustainable choices in the renovation and construction of the places we live. Today, I will be your moderator. My name is Brett Little, and I am the education manager here. Now, this course is approved for multiple continuing education units, including 3 of the pillars of green and our certified green home professional designation, health, energy, and materials. AIA Health, Welfare, and Safety may make it applicable to your state-based design or contractor license. Also, a huge thanks to Energy Smart Institute, who is an ICC preferred education provider, for helping us get this course approved for the International Code Council CEUs. So with that, I am going to hand it off to our speakers here today. We have who will introduce themselves and the organization. We have Anshul, and we also have Madeline. Madeline is also on our board and our some of our committees, and has been a speaker here on our sessions before. So Anshul, glad you could join us. Madeline, welcome back. Please take it away.
So good morning, everybody, and thanks so much for joining us here today. As Brett said, I am a GHI board member and super excited to be presenting again today. This morning, we're going to be presenting findings from an energy efficiency intervention that was actually carried out in one of the oldest public housing developments in the country. And our hope is that this information will probe some really important discussion around the state of public housing. So again, my name is Madeline Miller. I'm a PhD candidate in the School for Environment and Sustainability at the University of Michigan. And I also own a Detroit-based textile recycling company that produces feedstock for thermal insulation and other upcycled products.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anshul Mall, and I'm a former master's in environmental health sciences student from the University of Michigan School of Public Health. Madeline and I are representing the University of Michigan research team that led this energy efficiency intervention. The work in this study is focused on the villages at Parkside, a low-income multifamily development located on Detroit's east side. The units were originally constructed before 1939 and then rehabilitated in 1996. In 1967, the city of Detroit faced one of the most violent uprisings in the US history due to job and housing discrimination. Ultimately, this led to millions of dollars in property damage, and much of Detroit's housing stock was never repaired. Currently, 80% of Detroit's mostly single-family housing stock was built before 1960. On average, public housing units in Detroit are around 59 years old. There are roughly 2,000 low-income multifamily units managed by the local housing authority that pose an opportunity for retrofitting. In this case, residents with low income are often eligible for utility offered programs that provide small energy conserving measures, but not deeper retrofits like building insulation.
So the villages at Parkside were originally constructed as brick units in 1939 and comprised, of about 775 units. The property was redeveloped in 1996 with 275 units remaining, and the existing homes in the villages at Parkside, or TVP as we call it, are handicap accessible townhome style units with bedrooms actually ranging from 1 to 5. So some units have as many as 5 bedrooms, and each unit has central air conditioning. So we knew in the beginning of this study that the residents would likely be eligible for free utility offered energy efficiency upgrades, but we wanted to make sure that residents and management were taking advantage of anything available to them. And so this was the focus of the first phase of the project. During the second phase of this research, when we started to explore the quality of these homes, we learned that the property was actually slated for redevelopment, and we decided to pivot a bit. So this research actually uses a utility offered energy efficiency program to understand the best approach to implementing a successful program where residents experience energy savings, cost savings, and overall improved living experiences. Our participants are multifamily residents with low income, and one of the goals of our project was to explore ways to engage people living on this property, but also living in similar housing. This research goes further to explore the actual characteristics of low-income multifamily housing that drive high energy costs for residents, discomfort for residents, and what the resources available to improve quality and comfort are for these residents.
In 2016, the University of Michigan and the Friends of Parkside began their professional relationship to research the impact of climate change on health. In 2021, the research team at Michigan started directly working with residents at Parkside to further understand their pain points and needs when it comes to energy. The university and several members of our team have been working with the community and with the nonprofit, the Friends of Parkside, located on the property for many years now. This means we are not only interested in their energy-related habits, but the overall well-being of the community. This established relationship has taught us the importance of building trust for the best research outcomes. The photos on this slide illustrate our participation in cleanup efforts, food drives, their annual health fair, and even open format workshops where we allow residents to share general concerns about their living experiences. To begin our energy-related efforts, we help facilitate resident participation in a local utility offered energy efficiency program. We deployed surveys to help us understand their energy experiences in household environments, and this helped us leverage a free program from our local utility where residents could receive small energy efficient upgrades. Participants received LED light bulbs, kitchen and bathroom faucet aerators, Wi-Fi enabled thermostats, Energy Star refrigerators, and pipe wrap where needed. Following the implementation of these measures and an analysis on of their impacts, we selected a subset of participants to receive Department of Energy home energy scores, hoping to learn of additional measures that could be taken to achieve an even more significant saving. Finally, we pivoted to support residents in a less formal capacity as they learned their current units would be demolished in the year to come.
So from our initial survey, we learned that the majority of residents in the villages at Parkside are African American, The average age of our study participant was about 50 years old. Many of the residents have been living in the villages at Parkside for about 15 years, with 2 to 3 people living in each unit. 64% of our study participants were unemployed, and all of our study participants had an annual income less than $20,000. Another important element of our study is energy burden, which is the percentage of household income spent on energy costs. While the mean energy burden in Detroit is 3.8%, the mean energy burden for Detroiters with low income is 10.2%. And the energy burden for multifamily residents with low income is 6%. So Detroit is actually one of 6 metropolitan areas with a greater percentage of high energy burdened households, being 30%, than the national average of 25%. For our study, participants actually experienced an energy burden ranging from 4.2% to more than 37%. From the health and household environment section of our survey, we learned that 40% of our study participants had previously been diagnosed with asthma. 38.5% of our participants believe that in the year leading up to the study, their home had reached an unhealthy temperature. 51% of participants saw evidence of mice and rats, and about 33% saw evidence of mold inside of their units. Also, in the health section of our survey, we ask a few questions about sleep habits based on existing sleep scales, and those are included on this maze slide. So the slight decrease in the averages for the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index and the Epworth Sleepiness Scale actually indicate a slight improvement in sleep across participants after the upgrades were installed. And the increase in the average SATIT score, which is the one in the middle, suggests improved sleep quality as well. And this is also after the upgrades were installed. So this was a really positive outcome for our study team and for our participants. So 39 residents completed our surveys and provided energy usage data before and after the upgrades. From our survey's energy questions, we learned that 63% of our participants in the year leading up to the study neglected basic necessities like food and medicine to pay their energy bills. 49% of participants had received a disconnection notice, and at the time that the surveys were deployed, 33% of residents were receiving energy assistance from our local utility.
The chart on this slide indicates that in a post-study survey, residents felt that they benefited the most from the Wi-Fi enabled thermostat. Following this thermostat installation, they also felt that the refrigerator, light bulbs, and high efficiency shower heads helped them the most. In the open-ended section of the post survey, we asked participants to provide open-ended feedback. Some participants shared negative experiences with the high efficiency shower head and LED light bulbs, but ultimately participants expressed satisfaction with the other upgrades. For example, one participant believed the upgraded refrigerator helped to keep their fruit and vegetables fresh for a longer period of time. Another participant believed the Wi-Fi enabled thermostat helped to control their DTE energy bill better.
My apologies for any background noise. There seems to be a grass cutting marathon going on outside of my window. But based on our energy analysis findings, we concluded that the average participant was expected to spend about 750 kilowatt hours more for heating during a 4-month cold period. And this meant that there was space to reduce electricity usage by more than about $100 per household. It is important to note that we saw a significant increase in electricity consumption connected to space heating, where some residents had up to 3 supplemental heating units throughout their home during cold periods. The most extreme energy burden among study participants was actually observed for one participant who reported using 2 space heaters continuously during the fall and winter months. This corresponded to a severe energy burden of 37.3%. And our analysis indicated that between 72% and 82% of this participant's electricity consumption was attributable to the cost driven by outside temperatures. So it was really cold out. But this corresponded to an average excess electricity usage of anywhere between 16 to 18 kilowatt hours per day throughout that cold season. And it actually resulted in about $422 of extra cost in their electricity bill. In the end, however, individual participant habits and several other limitations made it really difficult for us to identify consistent energy and cost savings, which can be seen on the figure in the figure on the left side of the screen. So some people saved and some people didn't. We used projected cost savings. We applied Detroit-wide average cost of electricity to each month to try to normalize things, but we still didn't see any clear pattern before and after the small energy conserving measures were implemented. We therefore pivoted to learn more about the actual construction and quality of these units. And to do that, we used the Department of Energy's Home Energy Score.
The Department of Energy's Home Energy Score is similar to miles per gallon rating. It generates a 1 to 10 rating of a home's efficiency, with 10 being the most efficient. It's generally used for single family homes, but we were advised that these townhome style units met the criteria to be scored. The score is actually based on the home's envelope, including its foundation, roof, walls, insulation, windows, and its heating, cooling, and hot water systems. The final report presents information about the home's construction, estimated annual energy use, and specs on the roof, foundation, walls, window, and HVAC system. In this study, we selected 10 units to be scored. If you take a look at the report on the left, it's from one of our study participants whose unit originally received a 6. It's important to note that if the participant's home received the upgrades recommended by the home energy score, there's a potential for their home energy score to be an 8, which would ultimately result in about $167 saved annually.
So before we discuss the actual scores assigned to each unit, I'll talk about some of the initial observations made by the home energy score assessor. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see some of those observations illustrated. And the first noticeable one is that several of the units on the property contain holes in the roofing that could be seen from the exterior of the buildings, where some of them were even covered with tarps in place of roofing. Another observation noted by the assessor is that inside of each unit, walls and basement floor rim joists could have used additional insulation. He noted that all units had insulation values of R7 for walls and R11 for attic floors. And that was relatively positive. Some of the more positive observations were that across our 10 home sample, all of the units had double pane windows, which are likely among the features that drove higher home energy scores. Most homes in the sample had high efficiency furnaces, newer central air units, and high efficiency water tanks that did have Energy Star labels. He was also informed that in the weeks leading up to home energy scores on the property, the heating and cooling systems had been maintenanced or tuned up in preparation for annual inspections, and that this could have contributed to increased scores. On the not so positive side, the assessor mentioned that each unit was pretty leaky. So blower door tests for these units generated some pretty high scores. The goal of a blower door test, of course, is to understand how much air is entering and escaping the unit and to be an indicator of leakiness in the unit. So the chart on the right-hand side shows that in a well-sealed building, which is the blue baseline, airflow is about 1,500 cubic feet per minute, or CFM, while the average CFM for our study participants' units is about 2,400. So that was pretty high. And in light of that, the assessor recommended that all of the units across our sample receive additional loose fill insulation and some air sealing upgrades. So now I'll talk through the actual scores. Across the 10 homes scored as a part of this study, the average score is a 7.2. And again, 10 represents the most efficient home. So these scores are surprisingly high, and we think that these high scores can be attributed, one, to square footage. For these units, square footage and raw score were strongly inversely related. So the really small units had really high scores. Um, and we saw this for the units that were just making the cut to be considered townhomes. We also think the fact that the systems were newer and had recently been maintenance, as well as the double pane windows, drove high scores. Um, and in the end, the average estimated annual savings for residents with the improvements recommended by the home energy score was about $47.20, which means residents would save about 3.2% on their annual energy costs if these additional insulation and window sealing mechanisms were applied. So some of our sort of big picture takeaways are that for townhomes like those in the villages at Parkside, built in the 30s with significant wear on building materials, it's pretty unlikely for a DOE home energy score of 9 to be achieved and to represent the true quality of the unit, especially in such dated housing where units are drafty, and some of them, as you can see in the picture on the right-hand side of the screen, even have large holes in their roofing. Based on the stark contrast between scores and square footage, the home energy score is likely not the most accurate 1 to 10 rating system for townhome style units, especially smaller ones. And residents in the villages at Parkside, their biggest benefit from these scores is likely the application of these recommended smaller cost saving measures that were suggested to management. These are some of the items that can be purchased from Home Depot and implemented at low cost. They're not deeper retrofits, but they could yield cost and comfort benefits. The feedback from visual observations of insulation and airflow are also helpful to management. The air sealing measures suggested in the report are sort of the lowest hanging fruit for management if taken. And again, residents will probably be more comfortable in their units if those measures decrease leakiness. So before we discuss the formal limitations of our study, we're going to go into some of our formal questions and we'll get into some final thoughts after that.
Um, Thanks, Madeline. Thanks, Anshul. Um, so yeah, the T stats that were used, um, just kind of curious on how those were used, a little more information since the tenants don't pay the utility bills directly. Is that correct? Oh, you're muted.
At
There you
this
go.
property, the residents do pay their utility bills directly.
Oh, so the residents are paying the utility bills as part of this study.
Yep, the residents are paying the utility bills. So Walker
Okay.
Miller Energy Services is actually the organization that did the upgrades and the home energy scores. And we were provided with some literature to help participants, maximize use of these units. But we did not have, due to scheduling limitations, one of the things we found was that a lot of the people living at this property had doctor's appointments throughout the week and so on. So we weren't able to be as hands-on as we would have liked to, sort of provide those run-throughs for how to best use the T-stats.
Mhm. Um, was kind of curious on just the general participation rate of the study. Um, it seemed kind of low, I guess. Was there just kind of was it hard to get a lot of people to participate, or can you speak to that? I guess you were kind of speaking to that a little bit, so.
Yeah, so participation is definitely a pain point for these types of programs. And
Mhm.
when you introduced this session, you talked a little bit about split incentives.
Yeah.
And so um, in this case, we did have the support of management, to say, hey, this is what we want to do on the property. These are the benefits. But I think sometimes it becomes difficult for management to really suggest or even mandate things when their comfort and cost savings are not on the line. So we had to do quite a bit of hands-on outreach. Anshul mentioned that Friends of Parkside is a nonprofit that's actually located on this property, and they were able to help us draft email, phone, text message outreach, and host workshops on the property to have the best possible participation. But in the end, it is fairly low. So more than 300 people actually received the energy efficient upgrades because as the local utility operates its multifamily program, everyone on the property, is eligible for various upgrades. But 39 people took our pre and post survey. And those are the people that we were able to attract to the clubhouse and, people who were excited about participating. We did incentivize participation. But yes, this is a fairly small sample. And Anshul, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I was going to say, as you mentioned, we did host on-site workshops where we met participants, we looked at their energy bill with them, helped them, find where our data points were in their portals and things like that. So you touched on everything, Madeline.
Thank you.
Uh, so going back to one piece you mentioned, Madeline, about you had sounds like you had the building owners or the property managers engaged, but maybe I guess was there a question about value? Like, did they see the value of increasing the value of their property by making improvements? Was that part of any of the conversations with them?
That was part of the conversation. I think at the time that we started working, as far as using these measures, even the larger measure of this study, which would be the Energy Star
Mhm.
refrigerator, as far as using these to increase sort of property value, this community had participated in a previous program where they received upgraded systems. But due to the fact that so many of the units were vacant and a lot of the equipment had been stolen at that point, I think there was some frustration with the property manager about where the actual value was in terms of installing new systems, especially refrigerators and things that can be moved fairly easily when residents transition to new homes and things.
Mhm. There was a bit of an observation that maybe some of the ratings too came out really well. Again, or well, let me step back here. That maybe the units that were given to you were just happened to be the ones that were well maintained, right? And so I wonder if there was something going on here where they're like, oh, we have these units, these are well maintained. Look at these. Don't look at the other ones. Like, did you get a sense that any of that was going on here?
No, so this project represents community-based participatory research in its truest sense. So
Okay.
the 39 people who took our pre and post survey, I actually called all of them to find out who would be available
Yeah.
home energy scores for the second phase of the project. So we did not handpick
Yeah.
these. These were the people who were available and willing. Some people have gotten really frustrated at the time that upgrades took and
Yeah.
missing some of the upgrades because of not being home and things like that. So these were the
Yeah.
people who were not frustrated with us and were really, happy to participate.
Did you so the home energy score obviously came back real high, concerns there given that these homes clearly needed assistance. Did you check the actual utility bills against what the home energy score was predicting? So the home energy score will predict, right? You mentioned the savings it predicted, but it also predicts what the bills should be. Did you see if their actual bills were well in line with that, or did you find their bills to be higher or lower? Did you look at that?
We put several of the bills against each other. So in the first phase of the
Yeah.
project, when we deployed the pre-survey, we actually collected everyone that we could, we
Mm.
collected their DTE bills. And when we put those against the estimates for the home energy score, I think we did fewer than five. So there's still room for us to, go back and do some double checking, but they were fairly accurate.
Okay, so they were accurate. So the score in of itself wasn't necessarily inaccurate in what it was saying, just that it was saying, hey, these homes that clearly need a lot of help, they're coming in really high though, so it's not necessitating a sort of urgency here, right? If they had been testing low, would that be fair to say?
Yeah, that's fair to say. And I believe I'll have to double check, but I think even this unit with this long blue tarp that is on the right hand side of this screen
Yeah.
received a 7 or an 8. So
Yeah. Well, that kind of brings me to my other question. So we, here have our sort of our green home inspection process, which supersedes home energy score. Home energy score is a part of it, but it looks at durability, health and safety, ventilation, water conservation, solar power, some folks were mentioning. And I'm curious to what extent the person who went in, was sort of myopically looking at, okay, I'm only looking at these energy features, right? The home energy score gives me this list. I'm only looking at this list. I'm sort of putting my blinders on, and I don't see the roof with the hole in it, right? I don't see the bath fan that's broken because the bath fan isn't on the home energy score. Did you
Right.
get a sense that that's kind of, and I don't want to call anyone out here or say anyone, it happens, right? They get paid to do a certain job and that's what they do, and they're not paid to do any more. So did you get a sense that the auditor was kind of just, I'm only looking at these things and I'm not looking at all the other sort of what we, durability, health and safety, or even other energy efficiency features that don't typically show up on the score?
So we actually, for another component of the study that I'm working on, I actually conducted interviews with the multifamily program manager who was responsible for orchestrating the installs in the first phase, and
Hmm.
two, the home energy score assessor. So I think he saw a lot, but there weren't
Yeah.
really many spaces, to your point, to indicate everything that he saw on the report. So Anshul will talk a little bit about it later, but one of the things
Oh,
that
okay.
a sort of pain point that he expressed was sort of the nameplate efficiency on the systems
Yeah.
not truly representing, how they're operating. If a 95% efficiency unit was installed 20 years ago, where is their space, on the home energy score tool to indicate that? And so I don't think it was a tunnel vision scenario. I just think
Yeah.
that there weren't many categories that allowed him to add those assessments. And he's done
Yeah.
hundreds of scores on single family homes. So I think it was
Yeah.
pretty apparent that this tool might not be the best fit or may need to be tweaked to accommodate this type of housing.
Yeah, that's very fair. Um, Another thing was I was wondering because these homes are so old, did they ever make it through that 2009 Better Building Stimulus Upgrade program that came out? Was that anything that you had seen when you looked at it? And I don't even know if that program ever even applied to multifamily. I know I used it and I had other people I helped use it, but I was always familiar with it on single family. So very long time ago.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I didn't see anything about that program,
Yeah.
in the data that they gave us. Do you remember that at all, Anshul?
I don't recall seeing anything in the data that they give us. No.
Yeah. Um, well, great. Yeah, it sounded like you had some other items to go through, so feel free to jump through those and then we'll get into the formal questions. So thanks.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Brett.
Yeah, I was monitoring the chat during our little session there. And I see a lot of you have questions about our sample size, and we're just going to go into more detail about that and our limitations for the study. So starting off, as reflected in the chat and as reflected by Madeline beforehand, our sample size for energy upgrades and home energy scores was a limitation. A larger number of homes would have allowed for a more meaningful analysis. Another limitation of the home energy score were that some units were smaller than the 1,000 square foot minimum to be considered townhomes, which likely also skewed our scores. During home energy scores, some attics were sealed closed while others were open, which made it difficult for us to assess insulation levels and collect further information. As discussed as well, compromised roofing may have also impacted scores. In some units, the report indicated that even with the suggested upgrades, there would be no improvement to the home energy scores. Compromised roofing could have contributed to this. Some units have also had really low scores with no recommended cost-effective improvements at all. We believe that some of the units received credit because of their high efficiency systems, excuse me. However, the home energy score does not account for the age of the systems or represent how they've been maintained. If a resident has a 95% efficiency furnace from 15 or 20 years ago, it may not have been maintained properly and is not as efficient as when it was installed. However, the score may have given the unit more credit than it deserves.
Thank you, Anshul. So this case study was really an attempt for us to understand how existing scoring mechanisms work for this type of housing, given that there is still a lot of, existing low-income multifamily housing in the U.S. This is a unique housing stock, but it does exist across the country, and it may need a scoring system that is tailored to its unique features and ownership. Local housing authorities and property managers should be exploring existing benefits right now to understand how they might fund deep retrofits in this type of housing and if any rebate opportunities apply. Another sort of aspect of this research was us, really working to attend workshops and meetings between residents and the property developer who's going to be working on the redevelopment project, excuse me, to understand in this case what the proposed modular housing looks like, and how that correlates to residents who have housing vouchers that they'd like to maintain, and housing that they deserve to have in a secure fashion. Our research team has plans to continue advocating for residents in the villages at Parkside, especially through the redevelopment process. And one of our goals is to consolidate our research findings to share them with other stakeholders in the multifamily housing space, including the local housing authority. So this is our last slide. We're so grateful to you all for listening. There's a lot more detail in the paper that we've recently published as a team about this first phase of the research. And if anyone has questions, we'll take those now.
Yeah, great. Well, we've got a lot of questions coming in, and we've got plenty of time to get to those questions. Just real quick before we do, the answer is yes. This session is being recorded, and you can rewatch it, share it online with a friend or colleague, catch anything you missed by going to our YouTube channel in the next week. You'll see it there, or you can go there right now. Click subscribe, ring the notification bell, and you'll get an instant update when the session is available. For those of you watching this in the future, not right now, but on demand, take your quiz with an 80% passing rate. You'll receive your CEU certificate. For those of you who are here today and you've been here for the entire CEU approved hour, check your spam as certs@gutenbergcerts.com. Review our CEU policy to receive your certificate. And as those questions are coming in, we're going to get to them here in a second. A huge thanks to our board of directors, one of them being Madeline, our volunteers, our executive director, Jose Reyna, and all of our sponsors who are making products that can help transform many of these types of housing projects to be more sustainable, such as Rheem with decarbonization of water heaters, Tamarack ventilation for many of the products used to help air seal and insulate homes, like these better Panasonic for better ventilation, Serve 2 for demand controlled Timber HP. Huge thanks to all of them to allow us to do these sessions. So, yeah, so we got quite a bit of questions coming in here. And so if you all see one too that I might have missed, if you're looking and you want to address it, feel free to do so. There was a specific question here. Was they were saying is each unit has an existing R11 attic floor. What was the additional insulation added? And then a sort of second question was there any mechanical system heating and cooling improved or installed?
Thank you for that question. So I think, as we all know, funding is a limitation of improving dated multifamily housing. So the local utilities multifamily program only allowed for the implementation of the light bulbs, faucet aerators, thermostats, refrigerators, high efficiency shower heads, and pipe wrap where needed. So there was no additional insulation installed. The home energy scores were the last time that we were on the property in that capacity. And there were no systems upgrades as for this phase of the project either.
Um, Someone was asking, they said they were familiar with something called the Jefferson East and Pecan Street study. Is that part of this?
So Jefferson East, um, Anshul, correct me, I'm not sure who received the Pecan Street monitors, but yes, there were three communities that were a part of this study. My research focused specifically on multifamily and thus the villages at Parkside, but there were two other communities that were a part of this. Jefferson East and Southwest Detroit Environmental Vision.
They were all a part of this, but each had their own separate team managing that unit or
Yep.
group.
So the homes in the other two communities were single family homes and are
Yeah.
so much different.
Hmm.
Um, So I may have missed this part here, but there's a comment with a question, and so the comment is kind of like recognizing that here in Michigan, especially on the investor-owned utilities, especially methane gas is typically more expensive than electricity by far, for now anyway. That I'm sure will change, but so the comment that's the comment. The question is they were saying, well, it looks like they're using electric space heaters. And so they were saying, wouldn't it make more sense to turn their thermostat up a degree or two with the methane gas heater instead of the space heater? So I don't know if I missed something there, but can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, once we sort of noted the units that were using space heaters excessively, we didn't continue any space heater research, but I believe that these participants would have done better by turning their thermostat up a notch,
Yeah.
especially for the people who were using 2 and 3 supplemental heating units. So that is a good point and a thought that we had as a research team. But Oh, well, it seems like somebody just put this in the chat as I was saying it. It would also depend on the leakiness, the extent of the draftiness in the unit. And yeah,
Right. Yeah. And as we always say, why guess when you can know you can run the energy models, and does the model say use the baseboard or the methane gas or whatever? I mean, we can always forecast those things. In the home energy score, right? But so actually that gets into the segues into this other question here about whether there was resident education involved. And so, we're talking about, when you should use your gas heater versus your strip heater, and then whatever other application. Was there an educational aspect to this that said, here are some things you could do now that don't involve any upgrades that could help you? Was that part of that at all?
that was a part. So during the workshops where our pre-survey was deployed,
Mhm.
we had representatives from the energy implementer on behalf of the local utility to answer not just questions about this project, but any questions that residents had about their unit. So it could have been, I remember someone asking about their toaster and, and if they should be unplugging that every day before they leave. But Joe is the person who came out and gave sort of a best practices pre pre-survey workshop, which was really helpful.
Mhm. Mhm. Um, Speaking of the sample size, when projects are pursuing affordable housing improvements, the requirements for a project are either 10 units or 10%, whichever is smaller. 10 units is the norm from our perspective for ascertaining a baseline. Um, sorry, this looks like more of a comment. So if you have it in a question format, please, please send it back. I should have read it first. Um, Let me get on to the next one. Was how the tenants live in the house, habits, utility usage, a part of the research? So we talked a little bit about the education aspect of it, but did you collect survey data, on, basically what, people did, like if they left their thermostat high or low, or, left their window
We
open?
do have some data. Yeah, we do have some data around that. So one of the reasons that we're so grateful to our study participants, even with a small sample size, is because I don't remember the exact number of questions on our survey, but it was really long. So it
Yeah.
took some residents several hours to complete the survey. And I lost the question. I was looking at it, but we did ask questions about whether participants set their thermostat, at what's considered a high level and leave it, or make adjustments to their temperature throughout the day. Some of the questions that we asked around employment and work hours helped us understand what those habits might look like. And then I think just as we were deploying our post survey, I could be wrong, but I think that's when everyone was switched over to the time of day rate. So
Mm.
we had a lot of conversation about, what do I need to run and when, but mostly to help residents. So that's something that for this type of research, there are many different efforts and papers that come out of one survey sometimes. And I think that's something that we may, follow up and learn more about.
Yeah, and I just saw some recent news coming out about people not understanding those time of use rates here in Michigan and paying very high air conditioning bills because of it. So I think a lot of people still don't understand it. So I can
Yeah.
imagine huge.
I think there's a really big opportunity for education there. When we were doing our sort of closing workshops in the other two communities, people still had a lot of questions about that. So you're right, Brett.
Yeah. And then one of our armchair auditors, I love to do it, I get it, said they might have seen asbestos in one of those shingles in that photo of the roof earlier. So you may want to, uh, I don't know. I don't know what you can say for legal purposes. We'll just leave it at that. So, just a heads up. Um, so another question is, I'm assuming that these are income restricted units with utility allowances. If so, did you have a chance to compare their energy costs to the utility allowance as well?
We didn't have a chance to do that. So the bulk of the energy cost and income data that we collected was in an effort to understand energy burden levels on the property. But I think that again is another opportunity for us to advance the research. Anshul, do you have any? I know we had a lot of discussion around cost and sort of this split incentive aspect. Anything to add there?
No, I think it would be great if we furthered the research to do that, but we didn't have a chance to do that with this one. We were supposed specifically focused on looking at price points before the retrofits and then after, and how much of the energy burden they had before and after those items were implemented.
Yeah. Um, so another question that came in was you looked at CFM on the air leakage. Right. That's the metric that gets plugged. That's the metric that gets generated by the blower door. It's the metric the home energy score looks at. But did you also do and just by the way, everybody, there's a whole report that has, I think, a lot more of these questions answered in it. So we'll share that out. But one of the questions was, and I'm going to add to it, was whether you converted that number over to air changes per hour at 50 pascals, which is typically more of a metric of leakiness. And I'll add to that question is whether for multifamily now we usually use the metric CFM at 50 per square foot of enclosure, like wall enclosure. Again, a lot of those things don't come up in the home energy score. So I guess the commenter here and myself were kind of curious if you looked at it from that perspective, or was it just purely CFM from an air leakage perspective?
For this phase of the study, it was purely CFM. So we extracted these figures directly from the 10 home energy score reports. I do see, just because I'm side Googling a really, seems like a really straightforward ACH 50 conversion. So I think that makes a good point, especially when we're talking about what exists in the academic literature, because it might help us put our findings against those more easily.
Um, The other question that came over was energy use intensity calculated. Now, I know the home energy score itself is an EUI, but it's not the same type of EUI that I think they're talking about. So I didn't know if you also looked at um, utility bill EUIs.
We didn't look at utility bill EUIs, and I think sort of a limitation that we didn't discuss is that we were initially relying really heavily on having everyone's sort of pre and post utility bills, but um, in this type of housing, there's also sort of a limitation that exists around access to Wi-Fi and digital devices. So that was another limitation of us having information about our study participants. Um, that made for even a smaller sample size of people who we had pre, post, and energy bills for. And we didn't do any other EUI calculations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to add on to Madeline's point, there was also a limitation in participants not knowing how to access the information on the energy bills. So therefore, that's why we hosted a lot of in-person workshops so that we can meet with our participants in person and get the data that we needed for pre and post.
Sure. Um, Another question here is, what advice would you give to regulators trying to work with property owners and developers of multifamily buildings to be more energy efficient? What would incentivize them when there are already property maintenance issues they have to overcome at some of these properties?
Yeah, I think so. We talked a little bit on some of our slides about pivoting to support the property um, throughout the redevelopment process. And I do think that the inconsistent energy savings findings from the first phase of the project and then the um, home energy scores that didn't seem to fit the quality of the housing are an indicator that maybe a redevelopment is not the worst outcome for this property. So in this case, we're pivoting to support the nonprofit involved as well as the community and try to facilitate the most positive interaction between them and the person hosting the property. I mean, yeah, who's responsible for the property redevelopment. One of the things that when we had our conversations with the program manager, just as far as getting buy-in from residents and property managers to launch programs like these, I think there still exists a need for on the ground outreach. And so a lot of the programs on properties like this don't work if people are not actually going out to these properties and setting up shop, setting up a tent to pass out literature and connecting with people face to face, as opposed to showing up in a door-to-door fashion and startling people who may not know, what the purpose of the visit is. So, um, I think, yeah, to answer that question, sort of all hands on deck and on the ground, showing up, trust building approach is what really worked for us, and I think what will work wide scale.
Yeah. Um, I was curious if the Weatherization Action Agency programs were I guess whether that had anyone even been called for these kinds of homes for this kind of work. Are they looking into that? Were there barriers to that? Clearly seeing some of the photos, I saw, obviously saw probably obvious what they call deferrals, where if the roof is in disrepair, they can't come and help. Well, they are starting to get some funds to do that. But anyway, I'm just curious if you discussed that. I might have missed it, but if that was part of the conversation, or if, they're looking into those resources.
Yeah, we discussed that, but to your point, the compromised roofing, the vacancy rate, and then just
Hmm.
the timeline for the redevelopment really
Yeah.
hindered our ability to take upgrades and things like that any further. And so I see several questions in the chat about new HVAC units and things like that. And there just
Yeah.
wasn't the funding or an opportunity as far as timeline to make any additional improvements. I also saw somebody ask about, are these units being replaced with modular? So I think that's one of the phases of the project that we were really eager to support residents through, because there was a lot of confusion around what the units were being replaced with and if people's housing would still be secure. And so there are some online renderings about what, to illustrate what the new properties should look like. Um, we are under the impression that these units will be modular and hopeful for an opportunity for the people who currently live in the villages at Parkside to go out to the builders facility so that they better understand what modular units are, because a lot of people thought they were trailers, and that drove even more anxiety across our participants. So
Yeah, no, that's very important and a good point. Thank you for pointing that out. So when they get to replace, do you know if a deconstruction process is in place so they're not just demoing and throwing everything away? Will there be an intent to try to dismantle and recycle, salvage as much as they can?
I think there will be. We haven't heard much about salvaging and recycling efforts, which is, of course, something that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
But we do have some information about a neighboring sort of solar park effort and then some other,
Oh,
boxes that it seems like they want to check to make the property more sustainable. So more to come
mm,
on that. I'm hopeful that they'll use best practices for the demo.
yeah. Great. Well, we are pretty much at our time here. I don't see any other specific questions. So I guess the question would, or I would ask, where can people go to find out, learn more, just both about the study itself and as well as, what is coming next for this area?
Yeah, so our contact information is on this thank you slide. So these are our university emails. I'm on LinkedIn as Madeline Miller. Happy to answer any questions. And the paper, as I mentioned earlier, has a lot more detail. So I don't know if Anshul pasted it in the chat.
I
Um,
did, but I can do that again right
yeah,
now.
she'll do it again. There's a lot more information in the paper. So if after you've looked at that, or even based on questions from this presentation, you want to reach out, here is our contact info.
All right. And we'll share out the paper as well with everybody, so you have that. So, perfect. Well, Angel, Madeline, thank you so much for your time and coming on the show and going over this important information so everyone can learn. We are off next week, everyone, for the holiday for as far as webinars. So we'll be back again the second week of September. So we'll catch you then. In the meantime, have a wonderful holiday for those of you in the United States, and take care, everyone. Be well. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Be sure to check out all of our courses available online that you can watch anytime and anywhere to pick up your CEUs. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube to get weekly updates and stay up to date on green building science courses, webinars, and home tours. Thanks again.